Welcome to my channel, INTJ Island. Today, I'm going to use a fictional dialogue to discuss the differences between extroversion and introversion. Recently, I had an email discussion with a viewer, and this topic came up, and I realized I had not created a video that covered this topic directly. This story contains a three-person dialogue. Mrs. Staci Curtson, now in her 30s, was born Staci Colt, and is known to her philosophy class simply as Professor Curtson, even by her own son during class time. If you have watched my other videos, you have encountered her before. Staci has just finished a lecture at the Amber Institute of Education on the planet of Attis, and two of her students have hung back after the class to talk about some questions they had about the material in the lecture. Paul is Staci's oldest son, and like his mother, he is an introvert. David is an extrovert and Paul's best friend. "Professor," David said, "might we have a word with you?" The tall, dark-haired young man of 16 was walking towards Staci. Staci smiled as she looked up. "Of course, I'm free for the next period." "Aren't the terms extrovert and introvert simply another way of saying someone's social skills are either good or bad?" asked David. "Paul," Staci said as she turned to look at her son, "do you think that is true?" The room was heavy with an aura of academia, with dark wood intricately carved, forming the desks, the podium, the beams supporting the paneled roof, and the large shelves laden with books that lined the walls. As if in irony, the cleverly designed lighting gave the illusion of spring being in the air with filtered illumination, as if they were outside, positioned under a shade tree on a sunny day. The air was fresh, and the students seldom fell asleep in this room. It felt too alive for that. Paul stood 4 inches shorter than David, and the color of his short hair matched that of his mother's long sandy blonde strands. But even at 5'8", he towered over his mother, who never quite reached 5 feet in height. "I don't know," Paul replied. "It kind of feels like that sometimes. I don't long for parties or being around a lot of people. But other times, I have a really good time when people are laughing and doing fun things." Staci said, "It sounds as though you think you are an introvert. Is that correct?" "Oh, come on, Mom," Paul said. "You know that I am." "And you, David?" Staci said. "I think I'm an extrovert," he replied. "I love being around groups of people and interacting with them." "Is that the definition of being an extrovert?" Staci asked. "I think so," David said. "So, if Paul likes groups sometimes, but doesn't like them other times, is he changing who he is when this happens?" Staci looked at Dave intently. "He must be," David said. "Paul, do you think you change who you are, depending upon your setting?" Staci asked. "Well," Paul said slowly, "I feel differently at different times, but I am still me." "David, you are studying chemistry," Staci said. It was a statement, not a question. "Yes, I am," David said. He smiled. "It's a fascinating subject." "What happens if you toss a bit of potassium into a dish of cold water?" asked Staci. David laughed. "It reacts very violently. Boom." "And what happens if you toss that same bit of potassium into a dish of mineral oil?" Staci's right eyebrow raised a bit as she looked David in the eye. "Why, nothing," David said. "It won't react with that solution." "Paul," Staci said, "do you think the potassium changes what it is, its basic nature, when it is tossed into water, from what it is when it is tossed into mineral oil?" "Of course not," Paul said. He shook his head and smiled. "So, how do you account for the different reactions?" Staci said as she turned to David. "The reason that potassium produces a strong reaction with water is because it combines with the oxygen and the hydrogen in the water to form a potassium hydroxide solution. This process releases a lot of heat, and it also produces hydrogen gas, and that gas ignites from the heat in the presence of oxygen in the atmosphere. It puts on quite an explosive display," David said enthusiastically. "But does potassium change what it basically is when it is tossed into mineral oil?" Staci asked. "That is silly," David said. "Exactly," Staci said. "What?" David said. "I get it," Paul blurted out. "You are saying that it isn't the person who is changing when he reacts differently to social situations. It is the situations that change." Staci smiled. Potassium reacts differently to different solutions, not because potassium is changing, but because the solutions are changing. It is the same with social interactions and people. So, you are saying that I am always an introvert? Paul asked. He wrinkled his brow. But why do I feel differently? What happens in the evening when you get back to your room after you've been to a party? Staci asked. I feel safe and relaxed, Paul said. Is that true after either type of group gathering? Staci asked. Do you feel safe and relaxed even after you've had a good time? Oh, Paul said hesitantly. Yes, I do. Even after a fun time, I am glad to get a quiet space where I can be myself. David, Staci said, how about you? How do you feel when you get back to your room after a busy night of socializing? I feel excitement bubbling around inside of me, David said. I think about the fun things I did and the people I met. I go over the events in my head, reliving the fun. Does it feel like you wish you were back at the party still? Staci asked. Yes, David said eagerly. I may be tired, and I know I need to relax and get some rest, but I would love for the party to go on forever. David, what happens when you get stuck in your room and can't visit with anyone for a time? Staci asked. It doesn't take very long, David said. Soon I am ready to go out and find someone to do something with. It is boring being all alone. I'm okay when I'm studying something and my mind is busy, but when I get tired of that, I have to get out there and mingle to recharge myself. Paul, how do you feel after being in your room for a long time? Staci asked. Usually, Paul said, I tend to want to get out into the woods or take a walk along Cookie Creek. I also might get into a pickup basketball game at the gym. I've always admired Paul's ability to stay with a school assignment, David said. He usually goes beyond what the teacher wanted and digs around the topic with background information. I am happy when I have the thing done. I might get an A, but Paul is working on that A+. Is that what you're doing, Paul? Staci asked. I never looked at it that way, Paul said. I do that extra work because I want to know and understand the subject. Everything in the universe seems so interconnected and complex. Behind every answer is another question. How do you stand it? David said. He laughed. I want to get out there and do something. You know, get a group of guys together and have some fun. I get claustrophobic stuck in my room for too long. Paul chuckled. You have no idea the sort of fun I have, even stuck in my room. I read stories of the old days on planet Earth, or about our robotic explorers reaching out to visit our star system. Did you know they found a stream of liquid oxygen running inside a cave on Hell? That planet, said David, is well named. The goddess Hel was ruler over the land of the dead, and you would have to be dead to be happy on that frozen speck. I always found that it was interesting, Staci said, that our most distant planet is named for the daughter of the god Loki, for whom our innermost planet is named. However, I think we are wandering as far away from the point of your original question as those two planets are from each other. Sorry, Paul said. This is what happens in my room as well. I can be moving in one direction and suddenly I am off after a new idea. Staci smiled at her son. Do you see the difference between an extrovert and introvert now? I think the potassium analogy makes it far clearer to me, David said. We are always the person we are, but the person we are can react differently based upon our current situation. Excellent, Staci said. So, being either introverted or extroverted doesn't say anything about your ability to socialize? Paul asked. You might tend to socialize less, Paul, being an introvert, Staci said. But when you do socialize, your social skills will determine how smoothly it goes, not your personality. When you are with close friends like David, Staci nodded in the taller boy's direction, you will have no trouble at all striking up conversations or sharing experiences and discussing the things you like or dislike. Even groups of people you enjoy being with pose no problem for you. Well, that's true, Paul said thoughtfully. Well, thanks, Professor, David said. I think you answered my question. You're welcome, Staci said. And I expect to see you this evening for the game. Well, you better, David laughed. Paul and I are both playing tonight. The boys waved their goodbyes as Staci pulled her teaching materials together and moved towards the door, heading for her office. The lights switched off automatically and the room was left in darkness. Are you an introvert or an extrovert? I hope this video will help you see the difference a little more clearly. If you enjoyed the video, please click like, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. If you click on the bell, you will also receive notifications when I put up a new video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.